That's the basics on avoiding and looking at performance problems. What I'm going to look at now real quick is some performance tools and some of the things to look at in them. I have another methodology here for performance tuning. This is a list of some of the performance monitoring tools you have at your disposal, depending on whether you want to monitor status, whether you want to run traces, whether you want to do tuning. By no means is this a complete and total list, but it's a really good place to start if you're trying to figure out what you want to do. It gives you some options for things that you can try. You should be familiar with these, or at least make sure the man pages are installed. In terms of tools, we have the obvious, the topazes, the NMONs, the NMON analyzer. We have the SAR command, error report, obviously. And then over on the right, the usual tuning ones. I also added iPerf, JPerf, and NetPerf because those allow you to do some network benchmark tests. And then there's obviously the commercial tools. IBM has commercial tools and so do many other vendors. A couple of other tools that are worth knowing about. The FileMon command is very useful if you think you may have hotspots. It'll identify your most active logical volumes, your most active physical volumes, your most active files, and so on. It is trace under the covers, which is why a lot of people don't run it. There's another one actually called FilePlace that looks at percents, how serial, how much you're moving all over the H-disk and so on. FileMon is the one I find the most useful. And then PerfPMR we've talked about. So NMON is the tool that we all know and love, and it's been around for a while courtesy of Nigel. So I run, as I said, with the new flags that get me the large pages and asynchronous I/O and so on. I'm not going to go into NMON in a lot of detail because it's much better written up at the wiki. I do have the links down below. I believe those may be moving sometime soon, so you may end up having to Google it if you can't find it at these links. This is a nice diagram of all the different things you can do with NMON data. So once you have the files, you can put them into the NMON consolidator. I use the consolidator. It hasn't been updated for a long time, so I don't use it to figure out how many cores. What I do is I take workloads from the same time. So maybe I take 6 LPARs that were running at the same time. I don't care if they're dedicated or shared or whatever. I dump them into the consolidator, and what I'm looking for a consolidation is what workloads peak at the same time and what workloads peak at different times. Because I don't want to put on one server workloads that all peak at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I want a mixture so that I can have fewer cores active but still take full advantage of the system. So that's what I use the consolidator for. The NMON analyzer I use for looking at data, particularly when I'm looking at performance problems. If you want to build a capacity planning or performance database, you can actually feed your NMON files into NMON2RRD, and it will create an RRD database, and you can use the RRD tool to automatically build website JPEG graphs. There's also an NMON to web, and then there's a pgraph, and every day there's more tools coming out. So just be aware that once you start keeping that NMON data, you can copy it to or move it to an NFS mount. And then on that system that's got the NFS, you can do all this post-processing and build yourself a nice little performance database or capacity planning tool. This is a list of some of the new things that came out with version 12 of NMON or an AIX6 with the NMON Topaz. They added stuff for folded CPUs, they added stuff for multiple shared pools, and fiber channel states and so on. So I put a couple of snaps from NMON data in here to sort of show you a few things. If I look at this particular system, I can see that on average I'm using about 9 physical CPUs. I'm peaking at 12.6, and you can see that across here. So here's my 9. It also gives me my average transactions per second and maximum transactions per second for I/O. And then it gives me something that's important to me, which is my read-write ratio. So on average, I'm doing 36:1 reads to writes. It also gives me my system percentage, so I can compare that to user. This is a shared system, so all I care about is the ratio of user to system. Am I making sure that I'm not spending all my time in system time and not enough in the user actually doing application work. There's a new tab called the pCPU All tab, and this basically gives me the physical cores consumed. So again, it's just a different way of looking at it, and it breaks it into user and system, which is kind of nice because I can see, what it looks like. There's also a BBBL tab, and in here you get the output from an LPAR stat. So it tells me I have 24 cores in the system. I have 16 in my pool. I have SMT4. This is just for this LPAR. and then it gives me my memory and so on. It also tells me I'm not donating, that I'm uncapped, that I'm SMT shared, and so on. So that's quite, it's a good, useful tab for getting some information about the way the LPAR is set up. If you go to the LPAR tab, there's a couple of things that you can look at there. The first one is I can actually look at my phys CPU versus entitlement. So here what I'm looking for is, this red line here is my entitlement, and this blue one is my phys CPU. So you can see that kind of most of the time below my entitlements. My entitlement's 10, and for the most part, we already know the average was 9. This looks like it's probably set about right. I have 16 VPs. I'm peaking at about 12 point something. So do I really need 16 VPs? I'll have to monitor this over a couple of days to figure that out. Then it also shows you the shared pool utilization, where it shows me this LPAR and what it's using, any other LPARs in the box and what they're using, and how much my shared processor pool is idle. So I can see if I have capacity to add additional LPARs to this particular server. So it's quite a useful chart. I have a number of useful web links here for signing up for notifications, the firmware code matrix, perf PMR, the fixed level recommendation tool, which I do want to recommend that you use. They just updated that, and they added a whole lot of new features to it, including one of the things that was very irritating was that you would go there, you would type in all your data, and then it would tell you what you had to do, and then when you came back a month later, you had to type it in all again. What they're now allowing you to do is multiple LPARs, and they're also allowing you to save your data to a file on your PC so you can upload that file and not have to key in all the same stuff. Obviously, Nigel's AI Expert blog, and then the new IBM Performance Tools thing. In the PDF, these should be clickable because I did make sure that I had enter on each one of them. I've also got the wikis. This is the link here to the HMC scanner that I mentioned, and the HMC scanner will allow you to, from your PC, log into your HMC and download everything and put it into a spreadsheet. So that's really nice. There's also the workload estimator. Right now, it doesn't support the D model 770s and 780s, so I've not been using it. Also, System Planning Tool doesn't support them right now. I also tend to find that workload estimators are a little on the low side with its estimations. So, use a combination of workload estimator, of RPerfs, of your own benchmarks, whatever works for you. And then I have the other performance tools links here. So don't forget, when you're right, nobody remembers. When you're wrong, nobody forgets. And I bring this up because that's where the documentation and the baselines and everything else are going to be your best protection. If you haven't been there, this is the Performance Wiki. And basically you can see that we have the links here to the Java Performance Advisor, VIOS, and virtualization. I recommend you start with the VIOS Performance Advisor, try that one, and then work your way through the other ones. There's also a Topaz Keck NMON analyzer and a number of other ones. IBM's adding to this all the time, so I would save this link if I was you. I have some samples here from the VIOS Advisor just to give you an idea of the kind of things that it reports on. We'll go quickly through them. So it gives you the name of your server, your LPAR ID, the date. It also tells me that, it's a 9117 MMA. It gives me the speed. It tells me how many online cores, what my VIOS levels are, and so on. It then goes through and it shows me my CPU capacity, what my entitlement is, what I'm using. It tells me information like my weight, how many virtual CPUs, and so on. Oh, and it also shows me that I'm SMT2. Here with the shared processing pool, it tells me that it's enabled, how big it is, how much I have free, etc. It then gives me my I/O activity. So here you can see I was doing 292 IOs per second at 32 KB, and then at peak I was pushing through nearly 2,000 IOs per second. This is just through this one VIO server, and I guess there was no real network activity going on. Then it does the same for the adapters. And by the way, what you would see if there was if they thought there was a problem, was you would see that this had gone red. It gives me more information about latency and so on. And then here you can see, for memory, it's saying, well, you got 4 gig, but I really think you need 7 gig. That's because it was looking at things like how many high-speed adapters, etc., that you had. So it gives you a recommendation there. Obviously, you're going to check and see if you're paging and so on. So you can see I was paging slightly at 0.2 megabytes per second. Is that a problem? I'd look at my page space and I'd look at my page in, page out rates. But at least this tells you, you've got 4 gig and you probably need a little bit more. If you want to download the presentation, I have the link here for you. I hope everybody's found this useful, and hopefully you'll join us for some more.